Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today, I have something special lined up for you. We're diving into 3 chilling high school horror stories. These tales will take you on a journey through eerie hallways and past locker room whispers, where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. So, grab your favorite snack, settle in, and prepare to be spooked as we explore the dark corners of high school life. Let's get started.
Story 1. Whispers in the Hallways.
Emily's stomach churned uncomfortably as she rushed down the hallway of her high school, her pace hastened by a sudden and overwhelming urge to reach the bathroom. The halls were bustling with students, their chatter and laughter filling the air as they went about their daily routines. She could feel her face flush with embarrassment as she hurried past her classmates, her cheeks burning with the shame of being caught in such a vulnerable state. Her mind raced with worries about what she might be coming down with, and whether or not she would be able to make it to her next class on time. As she finally reached the bathroom, she breathed a sigh of relief and hurried into a vacant stall. The stench of bleach and disinfectant was overpowering, but at least it masked the other unpleasant odors that she had been desperately trying to ignore. With a groan, she lowered herself onto the cold, hard toilet seat and began to relieve herself. The sound of water running from the sinks nearby provided a comforting background noise as she tried to focus on something other than the pain in her stomach. After what seemed like an eternity, Emily finally finished and stood up, pushing the stall door open with a quiet creak. She glanced around, relieved to see that the bathroom was still empty, or so she thought. As she turned to wash her hands at one of the sinks, she couldn't help but notice a strange whistling coming from one of the stalls. The melody was vaguely familiar, yet eerie at the same time. She couldn't quite place it, but it sent a shiver down her spine nonetheless. Deciding that it must be the janitor, Emily finished washing her hands as quickly as she could and dried them on a paper towel. As she turned to leave the bathroom, she hesitated for a moment, debating whether or not she should say something to the janitor about his whistling. After all, it was rather rude to make such a racket in the middle of the school day. With a deep breath, she summoned up the courage to speak and stepped out of the stall. To her surprise, the janitor wasn't in the stall where she had heard the whistling. Instead, he was standing right in front of her, staring at her with a cold, unyielding gaze. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized that he must have been whistling while he was cleaning one of the other stalls. The janitor continued to stare at her, his expression unreadable, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over her. Just as she was about to speak, he flashed a disturbing smile and turned away, walking back to his cleaning cart and continuing with his work as if nothing had happened. Emily stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of confusion and fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the janitor's behavior. As she made her way back to her classroom, she glanced over her shoulder several times, half expecting to see the janitor watching her from a distance. When she finally made it back to her desk, she found Elias waiting for her, looking concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear him. Emily took a deep breath and told him about the strange encounter she had just had with the janitor. To her surprise, Elias revealed that he had had a similar experience with the janitor earlier that day. They exchanged worried glances, both unsure of what to make of the situation. As they discussed the matter, they decided that they would keep an eye out for any further unusual behavior from the janitor and report him to the authorities if necessary. Later that day, Emily met up with Payton between classes. "Hey, did you know the janitor's been whistling a lot lately?" she asked, unable to shake the image of his eerie smile from her mind. Payton nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Yeah, Ava noticed. It's kind of creepy, actually. I wonder what's gotten into him." The two friends exchanged knowing glances, their suspicions about the janitor growing stronger with each passing minute. As the days went by, Emily, Elias, and Payton continued to keep a close eye on the janitor, noting down any instances of unusual behavior they witnessed. They began to see patterns in his whistling, realizing that he seemed to be whistling a different tune each time, but always in a way that sounded deliberately menacing. They grew more and more convinced that something was wrong, and that they needed to do something about it. Finally, they decided to confront the janitor during his break. They cornered him in the staff room, where he was enjoying a cup of coffee, and demanded an explanation for his strange behavior. The janitor merely smiled at them, his eyes gleaming with malice, and began to speak in a voice that sounded disturbingly like the whistling they had heard so many times before. "Why, hello there, children," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've been expecting you. You see, I've been watching you for quite some time now. You've all been so busy with your little lives, so focused on your studies and your friendships, that you never noticed me. But I saw everything." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee, and continued. "And now that I have your attention, I think it's time we had a little chat." Emily, Elias, and Payton exchanged worried glances. They didn't know what to make of the janitor's words, but they knew one thing for sure: they couldn't ignore him anymore. As they stood there, silently waiting for him to continue, the janitor's smile widened, revealing a set of sharp, pointed teeth. "Don't worry, children," he said, his voice softening. "I'm not going to hurt you. Not right now, anyway." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "But I can make your lives very, very difficult from here on out. So, I suggest you all do what you're told from now on." With those ominous words ringing in their ears, Emily, Elias, and Payton turned and fled the staff room, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that they had to tell someone about the janitor, but who could they possibly trust? They couldn't even be sure if anyone would believe them. As they hurried back to their classrooms, they exchanged one last worried glance, each of them wondering what would happen next. For now, all they could do was wait and watch, and hope that they could find a way to stop the janitor before he could make good on his threats. But as the days went by, they began to realize that the janitor was not a man to be underestimated. He was clever, cunning, and seemed to be everywhere at once. It was going to take more than just luck to outsmart him. It was going to take a plan. The three friends spent countless hours huddled together in hidden corners of the school, plotting and scheming, trying to come up with a way to take down the janitor once and for all. They knew that they couldn't do it alone, and so they decided to enlist the help of a few trusted allies. Together, they would form a small resistance group, dedicated to bringing the janitor to justice and restoring peace to their beloved school. As they began to put their plan into action, Emily couldn't help but feel a strange mix of fear and determination coursing through her veins. She knew that what they were doing was dangerous, but she also knew that they had no choice. The janitor had left them with no other option. She only hoped that their efforts would not be in vain. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when they discovered that the janitor's name was not, in fact, janitor. It was Mr. Jenkins, and he had been working at the school for over 30 years. No one had ever suspected him of wrongdoing before, but now that they knew the truth, they could no longer ignore it. They had to stop him before he could cause any more harm. The night of the big confrontation finally arrived. Emily, Elias, Payton, and their fellow conspirators gathered together in the school's abandoned boiler room, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. They had planned everything to the smallest detail, and now they were ready to put their plan into action. They crept through the shadows, avoiding any cameras or security systems that might give away their presence. When they reached the janitor's supply closet, Emily, Elias, and Payton took up positions on either side of the door, while their allies waited outside. At Emily's silent signal, they burst into the closet, shouting and brandishing makeshift weapons. The janitor, caught completely off guard, tried to flee, but he was no match for their numbers. "Why are you doing this?" he shouted, struggling against their grasp. "I've done nothing wrong." But they knew better than to believe him. They had seen and heard too much. With a final shove, they pushed the janitor to the ground and pinned him there. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "We know what you've been doing," she said. "We know about the cameras and the files, and we're not going to let you get away with it." The janitor, or Mr. Jenkins, whichever he was, laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he sneered. "I've been protecting this school for years, keeping it safe from people like you. You're all just a bunch of spoiled brats who don't understand the real world." His words stung, but Emily refused to back down. "We understand just fine," she said, glancing over at her friends. "We understand that you've been manipulating us and using us all this time. then we won't let you do it anymore." With that, she pulled out her cell phone and snapped a photo of Mr. Jenkins, documenting his arrest. The janitor, or Mr. Jenkins, was taken away by the police that night. The school board was informed of his actions, and several new security measures were put into place to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Emily, Elias, Payton, and their friends all returned to their studies, but they could never quite forget the lessons they had learned from their encounter with the mysterious janitor. They had faced their fears and stood up to the darkness, and in doing so, they had found strength within themselves they never knew they possessed. The school might never be the same, but they took comfort in knowing that it was now a safer place for everyone who walked through its hallowed halls.
Story 2. The Tragic Incident.
As the final bell of my sophomore year at East High School rang out, the usual chatter and laughter filled the hallways. I, Samantha Jones, exchanged knowing looks with my group of friends as we made our way to the crowded cafeteria. We were all excited for the summer break, but there was something else in the air today. A sense of anticipation, perhaps. Or maybe it was the butterflies in my stomach, fluttering wildly as I thought about the upcoming prom. My friends and I had our own little group, known as the Crew. There was Andrew, my best friend since elementary school. Emily, the quiet one with a wicked sense of humor. Michael, the class clown who could make anyone laugh. And Lily, our resident bookworm who was always up to date on the latest gossip. We were inseparable, always sticking together through thick and thin. Just as we sat down at our usual table, the school's PA system crackled to life. "Attention, students and faculty," came the principal's voice, sounding strained and panicked. "This is not a drill. We are currently experiencing an emergency lockdown. Please remain in your current location and follow the instructions of your teachers and staff." The police have been notified and are on their way. There was a collective gasp around the cafeteria as everyone's eyes widened in fear. Even though I tried to remain calm, my heart began to race as adrenaline surged through my veins. I glanced over at my friends, their faces pale and filled with uncertainty. Andrew placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, giving it a squeeze. "Don't worry, Sam. We'll be okay," he whispered. As the minutes ticked by, the silence in the cafeteria grew deafening. No one dared to speak, let alone move. Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of 3 gunshots echoed through the halls, sending chills down my spine. Screams filled the air, drowning out everything else. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. I wanted nothing more than to run, to find some sort of safety, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. Andrew and I exchanged a look. We both knew we had to do something. We couldn't just sit here and wait for something horrible to happen. Without saying a word, we decided to sneak out of the cafeteria and find a hiding spot. We weaved our way through the dark hallways, barely able to see in front of us. The only light came from small, dim emergency lamps. As we rounded a corner, we nearly tripped over someone lying motionless on the floor. We stopped in our tracks, fear paralyzing us once more. It was a teacher, her body covered in blood. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her lifeless form. "Andrew," I whispered, my voice shaking, "I think we should go back. We shouldn't be here." But before he could respond, 3 more gunshots rang out. We both ducked for cover, pressing ourselves against the lockers. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. "We have to find somewhere safe," Andrew hissed, his voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. "Come on." We continued to creep down the hallway, moving from room to room, trying to avoid the gunshots that seemed to echo from every direction. Finally, we reached the front of the school, the glass doors leading to the parking lot just a few feet away. We peered outside, hoping to see the police cars we knew had to be here by now. But instead of seeing any sign of rescue, we saw the shooter. He was a student from another school, one we didn't know very well, but whose face we now recognized all too clearly. He was wearing a trench coat, his hands shaking as he held a gun. His eyes were wild, filled with a look of pure hatred, as he aimed his gun at a group of students huddled together on the ground. We knew we had to do something. We dashed out of the school, running towards the shooter. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice raw from fear. "You don't want to do this." The shooter whirled around, his gun trained on me. There was a moment of silence, as if time itself had stopped. Then, he smiled and squeezed the trigger. I felt a searing pain in my chest, and the world went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. My parents were sitting beside my bed, their faces pale and drawn. They looked at me with an expression that I had never seen before, a mixture of relief and heartbreak. "Honey," my mom said, her voice shaking, "you were shot." I didn't remember much of what happened after I'd been hit. I knew that Andrew had tried to shield me from the bullets, but they had found their way through his body instead. I had been rushed to the hospital, my lungs filling with blood as I struggled to breathe. They had to perform emergency surgery on me, removing one of my damaged lungs. Now, I was connected to a ventilator, my chest wrapped in bandages. I wanted to ask about Andrew, about my friends, but the words caught in my throat. I knew that the chances of anyone else having survived were slim. The shooter had killed himself after being shot by the police, but not before taking several innocent lives. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to recover. My body healed, but my mind was left reeling from the horror of what had happened. I thought about the prom, about how excited I had been to go with Andrew, how we had dreamed of dancing together under the stars. But now, those dreams were gone. Forever. When I finally left the hospital, I went back to school, but things were different. The halls were quieter, the laughter muted. The world had changed, and I felt like I would never be able to find my place in it again. My friends were there for me, offering their support and comfort, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They were all still haunted by what had happened, and I knew that I never truly would be able to forget either. The summer after the shooting, I decided not to attend prom. I didn't feel like I was ready to face the world, to pretend like everything was okay. Instead, I spent the evening at home, watching movies with my family. It wasn't the night I had imagined, but it was somehow fitting, because even though the world would never be the same, I knew that I would survive. Somehow, I would find a way to carry on, and maybe, someday, I would even be able to dance again. But for now, I was content to just exist, to live in the aftermath of the night that had changed everything.
Story 3. The Last Daylight.
The sunlight peeked through the crack between the heavy library curtains, casting a warm, golden glow on the dusty wooden floor. I sat cross-legged on the cold, hard linoleum, my back pressed against the bookshelf, inhaling the familiar scent of old books and dust. My heart ached with an unshakable weariness. It was my last day of high school, and despite the excitement that should have filled me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. My family was falling apart, and I could do nothing to stop it. I had skipped biology class, opting instead to hide out in the library, hoping to avoid the endless stream of well-wishers and their obnoxious congratulations and good luck. I didn't need their empty platitudes or their fake smiles. I just wanted to be left alone. The familiar click of heels echoed through the library, followed by the librarian's stern voice calling out a code word over the intercom. Confused, I wondered what could be going on. Before I could make sense of it, the intercom blared again, this time announcing a lockdown. My heart stopped. This couldn't be happening. I quickly ducked behind a nearby computer desk, trying to remain hidden. The rest of the library fell silent, and I could hear the anxious whispers of the other students as they scrambled to find their hiding places. Just then, the main library doors swung open, and in walked Tyler, a kid I hadn't seen since middle school. His face was flushed, and he held a flashlight and a gun in shaking hands. Terror gripped my chest as he scanned the room, the beam of the flashlight dancing across the bookshelves. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, and sweat trickled down my back. It was him. It was Tyler. I knew him, and that was what made this so much worse. I felt a desperate urge to flee, but I knew that if I moved, he'd see me. Tyler began to pace the length of the room, his eyes darting from one hiding spot to another, the gun never wavering. I tried to calm my breathing, to make myself as small and as quiet as possible. I didn't want to die here. Not today. Not like this. As he continued to search, I could hear the frantic whispers of the other students around me, pleading with him to stop. to just leave. But Tyler didn't seem to hear them. He was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop him. I couldn't believe this was happening. Tyler had never been the type to cause trouble. We'd had our fair share of disagreements in middle school, but I'd always thought we'd grown past that. I couldn't understand what could have driven him to do this. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Tyler seemed to lose interest in searching the library. He wandered over to a table in the corner and sat down, resting the gun on the surface in front of him. His breathing was ragged, and his face was flushed with either anger or fear, or maybe both. I couldn't tell. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just wait for the police to arrive and hope they didn't hurt him. Maybe if I could talk to him, calm him down, I could stop this from getting any worse. But how could I reveal myself without putting everyone else in danger? Carefully, I began to slide out from behind the desk, inching closer to Tyler. "Tyler?" I said softly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "It's me, Emma. Remember me?" There was a long silence, and then he slowly turned his head in my direction. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy with tears. "Emma," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" I took a deep breath and slowly moved closer to him. "I'm sorry, Tyler. I didn't know you were planning to do this. I just wanted to talk to you, to see if we could work things out." He shook his head, his eyes filling with tears again. "It's too late for that, Emma. I've already lost everything. You don't have to do this, Tyler. You can still turn yourself in. There are people who can help you." I reached out a hand, but he flinched, moving the gun slightly closer to me. "No, Emma. You don't understand. I can't go back to that life. I can't face them again." His voice cracked, and he looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Then let's run away together," I blurted out, my heart racing. "We can start over somewhere far from here, where no one knows us. We can make a new life together." Tyler's head snapped back, surprise registering on his face. For a moment, I thought he might consider it, but then he shook his head again, more forcefully this time. "I can't do that to you, Emma. I can't drag you into this mess." My heart ached at the hopelessness in his voice. "Tyler, I want to be with you. I don't care about any of that. I just want us to be happy." He looked at me for a long moment, and then he let out a shaky sigh. "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't do this." Before I could say anything else, he stood up, the gun still in his hand, and pointed it at his head. "Tyler, no." I screamed, reaching for him, but it was too late. There was a loud click, and he crumpled to the ground. I stared in horror at the gun in his hand, the blood streaming down his face. I had failed to save him. I had failed us both. The intercom blared again, the lockdown over. Police and paramedics rushed into the library, their voices echoing through the silent room. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the boy who had been my friend, and now lay lifeless on the library floor.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to listen to similar stories in future.